Audrey Hepburn and William Holden. Sabrina, 1954. In Billy Wilder's 1954 romantic comedy Sabrina, the on-screen spark between Audrey Hepburn and William Holden didn't just belong to the script. It echoed a rumored off-camera affair that has intrigued film historians for decades. Hepburn, then 25 and newly crowned with an Oscar for Roman Holiday, played Sabrina Fairchild, the chauffeur's daughter torn between two vastly different brothers. Holden, 35 at the time, portrayed David Larrabee, the carefree playboy who becomes unexpectedly smitten. Their chemistry on screen was undeniable, but it's what may have happened off camera that has kept audiences curious. According to Edward Z. Epstein's biography, Audrey and Bill, the two stars reportedly began a romantic relationship during filming. Some sources suggest the affair grew serious, until Hepburn discovered that Holden, already married to actress Brenda Marshall, had undergone a vasectomy. For Hepburn, who longed for children, this revelation was said to be a turning point. She ended the relationship, and the emotional fallout, some argue, seeped into their performances. Critics at the time noted an unusual poignancy in their scenes together. Film historian Donald Spoto described their on-screen dynamic as tinged with real-life melancholy, hinting that the heartbreak may have added a layer of authenticity to the romance. Insiders assert that Holden never quite recovered. In later interviews, he referred to Hepburn with deep affection, calling her the love of my life, a sentiment echoed in Bob Thomas's authorized biography. Adding to the tension was Humphrey Bogart, cast as the older, more serious brother Linus. At 54, Bogart reportedly felt out of place among the younger cast and clashed with Wilder over the film's tone. Some crew members claim Bogart viewed Hepburn as too inexperienced and Holden as too casual, creating a chilly atmosphere on set. Whether those tensions were professional or personal remains debated, but they may have reinforced the emotional divide between the characters. While Sabrina ends with Hepburn's character choosing Linus, many still argue that the true romantic electricity was between Sabrina and David. The bittersweet undertone, both on and off screen, gives the film a complexity that few other romantic comedies of the era managed to capture. It's a rare case where Hollywood fantasy was built on something far more complicated and far more real than the script ever revealed. Joan Fontaine as Lisa Burned, Letter from an Unknown Woman, 1948. A man receives a letter from a woman he doesn't remember. That's the setup. But under Max Awful's direction, it becomes a study in romantic tragedy, with Lisa Burndle at its fragile, aching center. Joan Fontaine plays Lisa as a woman suspended in emotional limbo, always watching, always waiting, never seen. Released in 1948, the film initially struggled to find commercial success. Some critics dismissed it as overly sentimental, and it underperformed at the box office. But time has shifted the verdict. Today, it's widely considered one of cinema's most haunting portrayals of one-sided devotion. Roger Ebert would later call it one of the most poignant stories of unrequited love ever filmed. Fontaine's performance is a masterclass in restraint. She doesn't plead or protest, she simply orbits the life of a man who barely registers her existence. Awful's signature camera work, those long, elegant tracking shots and circular movements only amplify the emotional isolation. A slow descent down a staircase or a quiet glance through a window becomes a visual echo of Lisa's invisibility. While Fontaine was nominated for an Academy Award for Hitchcock's Suspicion in 1941, her actual Oscar win came a year earlier for Rebecca. Despite that recognition, she was often typecast in roles that emphasize fragility. Some film scholars have speculated that Lisa's quiet anguish mirrored Fontaine's own professional frustrations. Subtle, unspoken, and often overlooked by the very system that celebrated her. Reports indicate that Awful saw Lisa not just as a tragic figure, but as a quiet indictment of romantic idealism. A woman consumed by devotion in a world that rewarded indifference. Some modern critics even frame Lisa Burndle as a proto-feminist symbol, not for defiance, but for the cost of emotional labor that goes unseen. Letter from an Unknown Woman may have missed its mark in 1948, but its legacy has only grown. Lisa doesn't fight for love, she dissolves into it. And in that dissolution, she became one of old Hollywood's most quietly devastating romantic figures. Merle Oberon as Kathy Earnshaw, Wuthering Heights, 1939. Few characters in old Hollywood carried the weight of doomed love quite like Katherine Earnshaw in William Wyler's 1939 adaptation of Wuthering Heights. Played with icy restraint by Merle Oberon, Kathy is a paradox, yearning for passion yet shackled by social ambition. Her volatile connection with Heathcliff, portrayed by Laurence Olivier, defined romantic obsession for an entire generation of moviegoers. Their love wasn't tender, it was tormented, destructive, and by some accounts irresistibly magnetic. The film, adapted from Emily Bronte's novel, stripped away the second half of the book, ending the story at Cathy's death and solidifying her as a tragic romantic icon. Critics at the time were divided. Some praised its intensity while others balked at its emotional bleakness. Still, the Academy took notice, handing it 8 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. Off-camera, rumors swirled that Oberon and Olivier clashed on set, with some speculating that their off-screen tension bled into their performances, fueling the film's raw chemistry. Authentic or otherwise, the outcome was a haunting portrait of love that's more fever dream than fairy tale. Cathy's legacy endures not because she represents ideal romance, but because she confronts it. In a studio era built on polished love stories, her character dared to be messy, selfish, and devastatingly human. Montgomery Clift as George Eastman, A Place in the Sun, 1951. In George Stevens' 1951 drama, A Place in the Sun, Montgomery Clift redefined the love-anchored lead with his portrayal of George Eastman, a man trapped between social ambition and emotional obligation. Adapted from Theodore Dreiser's novel An American Tragedy, the film captured the fragility of love under pressure, and Clift's performance turned Eastman into one of the golden era's most complex, love-laden figures. Clift, often credited with helping usher method acting into mainstream American cinema, brought a rawness to Eastman that stood in stark contrast to the polished masculinity of the era. Film historian Robert J. Korber noted that Clift's approach introduced a new kind of male vulnerability that would ripple through performances by James Dean and Marlon Brando. Eastman wasn't a hero. He was conflicted, emotionally fractured, and quietly desperate. The emotional tension centered on Eastman's love for the glamorous Angela Vickers, played by Elizabeth Taylor, and his entanglement with Alice Tripp, a working-class woman carrying his child. The chemistry between Clift and Taylor sparked industry buzz, amplified by their off-screen closeness. Taylor would later call Clift her soulmate, and some biographers have speculated that their bond bordered on romantic territory. Whether or not that line was ever crossed, the connection translated into a tenderness on screen that critics praised as unusually intimate for the time. Behind the scenes, Clift's immersion in the role was intense. Some accounts suggest he stayed in character between takes and kept his distance from the cast and crew. Some surmise that Eastman's moral collapse reflected Clift's own internal struggles, particularly with identity and the rigid expectations of masculinity in post-war Hollywood. At the 24th Academy Awards in 1952, A Place in the Sun earned 6 Oscars, including Best Director for George Stevens and Best Adapted Screenplay. Clift was nominated for Best Actor, but the award went to Humphrey Bogart for The African Queen. Still, Clift's performance endured, not as a triumph of romantic idealism, but as a haunting portrait of a man undone by love, class, and the crushing weight of desire. Actor James Dean reportedly studied Clift's work closely, borrowing from his emotional depth to craft his own tragic leads. George Eastman remains one of the studio era's most unforgettable love-charged characters, not because he represented perfect love, but because he embodied the kind that's flawed, desperate, and ultimately doomed. Cary Grant as T.R. Devlin, Notorious, 1946. In Alfred Hitchcock's 1946 thriller Notorious, Cary Grant's T.R. Devlin shattered expectations of the classic romantic lead. Devlin wasn't suave or tender. He was emotionally armored, morally conflicted, and at times deliberately cold. Tasked with convincing Alicia Huberman, played by Ingrid Bergman, to seduce a Nazi conspirator, Devlin's detachment reads less like professionalism and more like self-preservation. The tension between his duty and his buried affection gave the character a complexity rarely seen in that era's romances. Film historian David Thompson once described Devlin as a man torn between love and loyalty, and unable to choose either. That internal struggle reaches a boiling point in one of cinema's most subversive, passionate scenes. To dodge the Hays Code's ban on kisses longer than 3 seconds, Hitchcock choreographed a nearly 2.5-minute sequence of fragmented kisses, whispered lines, and subtle touches. According to film scholar Jeanine Basinger, the scene redefined screen romance by making what wasn't said or shown speak volumes. Rumors swirl that Grant initially resisted the role, concerned Devlin's icy demeanor might tarnish his polished screen image. Hitchcock reportedly urged him to lean into the ambiguity, and Grant later called it one of his strongest performances. Some film historians even suggest Devlin laid the groundwork for the emotionally distant spy archetype, an early shadow of characters like James Bond and George Smiley. Decades later, Notorious still ranks among the American Film Institute's top romantic films, and Devlin remains a paradox, a man whose silence speaks louder than his declarations, whose restraint masks a deep, unresolved longing. In a genre built on grand gestures, his quiet torment left a lasting mark. Bette Davis as Charlotte Vale, now Voyager, 1942. In the early 1940s, Warner Brothers released a romantic drama that sidestepped convention and redefined what a leading lady could look like. In Now Voyager, Bette Davis took on the role of Charlotte Vale, a woman not introduced as glamorous or confident, but as emotionally fragile and tightly controlled by her domineering mother. Her transformation into a poised, independent figure wasn't driven by romantic conquest, but by self-realization and psychological growth. The film's title comes from a line in Walt Whitman's The Untold Want, "Now Voyager, sail thou forth to seek and find." It set the tone for a story that's more about emotional liberation than traditional romance. Still, the romantic thread, Charlotte's bond with Jerry Durrance, played by Paul Henreid, remains one of Hollywood's most quietly powerful. Jerry is married and emotionally unavailable, yet their connection is deeply intimate. Their love story, defined by restraint rather than fulfillment, culminates in the iconic line, "Don't let's ask for the moon, we have the stars." One scene in particular, Henreid lighting 2 cigarettes and handing one to Davis, became a hallmark of cinematic romance. It's been echoed, parodied, and referenced for decades, securing its place in pop culture history. Reviewers of the era lauded Davis's performance for its nuance and emotional depth. While the New York Times review didn't use the exact phrase often quoted today, it did acknowledge her ability to fully inhabit a complex role. The performance earned Davis an Academy Award nomination and helped solidify her reputation as a master of psychological drama. Off-screen, Davis was known for her strong creative opinions, and her working relationship with director Irving Rapper is said to have been layered. Some accounts suggest Davis took charge of key scenes, with rumors floating that she once claimed, "I directed that film myself." Whether literal or not, the comment reflects her well-known assertiveness on set. Stories claim that this behind-the-scenes tension may have fueled the emotional authenticity of her performance. Charlotte Vale didn't just resonate in the 1940s, she helped set the blueprint for the contemporary romantic protagonist. Flawed, self-aware, and unwilling to settle for less than emotional truth. Gregory Peck as Joe Bradley. Roman Holiday, 1953. In Roman Holiday, released in 1953, Gregory Peck's Joe Bradley wasn't designed to be a sweeping romantic hero, but that's exactly what he became. As a disillusioned American journalist chasing a scoop on a runaway princess, Bradley begins with a paycheck in mind, not a fairy tale. Yet his arc flips the script on conventional Hollywood romance. Instead of winning the girl, he walks away, quietly, respectfully, and with nothing but memories. In an era addicted to happy endings, that restraint hit harder than any kiss ever could. The film's final scene, where Bradley exits the palace alone, was far from a studio favorite. According to some accounts, executives were uneasy about the downbeat ending, fearing it would alienate audiences. But director William Wyler and Peck are believed to have stood their ground. That creative choice, no embrace, no reunion, ensured Roman Holiday remained one of old Hollywood's most emotionally resonant love stories. Behind the camera, a different kind of bond unfolded. Purportedly, Peck, already a major star, advocated for Audrey Hepburn to receive equal billing after seeing her early footage. "She's going to be a big star," he warned the studio in various retellings. The move wasn't just kind, it was prophetic. Hepburn won the Academy Award for Best Actress, and the film launched her into global fame. Filmed entirely on location in Rome, Roman Holiday was a logistical gamble. The famous Vespa ride through the city was carefully choreographed, but the real Roman traffic added chaos and charm. While some stories exaggerate how improvised it was, the truth lies somewhere in between, controlled mayhem that looked effortless on screen. Joe Bradley also marked a shift in Peck's career. Known for stoic, morally upright roles, he risked softening his image with a romantic lead, but the gamble paid off. A number of film experts contend this role helped expand his range, paving the way for his later turn as Atticus Finch in To Kill a Mockingbird. Today, Joe Bradley remains one of old Hollywood's most romantic figures, not because he got the girl, but because he knew when to let her go. In a town built on fantasy, Roman Holiday dared to end with something far more rare: quiet, dignified heartbreak. Humphrey Bogart is Rick Blaine, Casablanca, 1942. Rick Blaine wasn't written as an emblem of romance. Early drafts of Casablanca painted him as distant and embittered, a man broken by betrayal, not transformed by it. But as rewrites evolved in 1942, the Epstein brothers and Howard Koch, working separately, reimagined Rick into something more layered, a hardened idealist cloaked in cynicism. That evolution gave Humphrey Bogart a breakout role that shifted his screen image. While he'd made a name playing criminals in films like The Petrified Forest and High Sierra, his turn as Detective Sam Spade in The Maltese Falcon had already started reshaping his career. Casablanca sealed the deal. Rick was still tough, still guarded, but now heartbreak was part of the armor. Film historian Aljan Harmitz once described him as the most romantic hero in movie history because he doesn't get the girl. His decision to let Ilsa go wasn't just emotional, it mirrored the wartime mood. Casablanca premiered on November 26, 1942 at the Hollywood Theater in New York City, just weeks after Allied forces landed in North Africa. Warner Brothers didn't plan the release as a political move, but they capitalized on the timing. Rick's sacrifice echoed the moment. Love set aside for duty, personal longing eclipsed by a larger cause. And then there's the line, "Here's looking at you, kid."
Here's looking at you, kid.
It wasn't in the script. According to film lore, Bogart came up with it during downtime, borrowing it from a phrase he used while teaching Ingrid Bergman poker between takes. Whether that's true or just part of Hollywood mythology, the line stuck, and became one of the most quoted in cinema history. Behind the scenes, the chemistry was more complicated. Rumors suggest Bogart and Bergman kept their interactions minimal off-camera. Some speculate that Bogart, married at the time, chose to keep things strictly professional. Whatever the reason, their restrained dynamic only sharpened the tension on screen. The clipped dialogue and the stolen glances, it all fed into the feeling of two people caught between passion and principle. Rick's final act, sending Ilsa away with Victor Laszlo, cemented his status as a love-driven figure not because he won, but because he lost with purpose. In a world unraveling at war, his choice became a symbol of sacrifice, of moral clarity, and of the bittersweet kind of love that defined Golden Age Hollywood's most enduring romantics. Deborah Kerr as Terry McKay, An Affair to Remember, 1957. In the realm of the classic era's romance, few characters have sparked as much enduring affection as Terry McKay. Played by Deborah Kerr in An Affair to Remember, released in 1957, Terry became a symbol of emotional restraint and timeless longing. The film, directed by Leo McCarey, was a reimagining of his own 1939 melodrama love affair. But this iteration, with Cary Grant as Nicky Ferrante, eclipsed the original in cultural impact. Initial reactions were mixed. On July 13, 1957, the New York Times critic Bosley Crowther dismissed the film as lushly romantic to the point of being syrupy. But the public had other ideas. Over the years, television syndication and critical reappraisals turned the film into a romantic touchstone, with Terry McKay at its heart. Kerr's portrayal of Terry, a nightclub singer with both elegance and quiet defiance, was shaped by a production that faced its share of challenges. One persistent rumor suggests that filming paused briefly due to Kerr's health, giving McCarey time to revise scenes and deepen the emotional stakes. Whether or not the delay truly occurred, the final script gave Terry a richer, more layered arc, especially in the aftermath of the accident that derails her reunion with Nicky. The Empire State Building sequence, often cited as one of the most love-infused moments in Hollywood history, was filmed with painstaking attention to detail. While the film never explicitly states the floor number, speculation has long swirled around the 102nd floor as the intended setting. A detail later echoed in Sleepless in Seattle, which paid tribute to the scene's legacy. Although the musical score is frequently attributed to Hugo Friedhofer, official credits list Harry Warren and Leo McCarey among the contributors, with arrangements by Vic Schoen. The music, subtle and sweeping, underscores the film's emotional restraint without overwhelming it. Behind the camera, whispers of a deeper connection between Kerr and Grant have fueled decades of curiosity. Some legends tease that their on-screen chemistry reflected a quiet affection off-screen, though both actors maintained a strictly professional public stance. Grant, known for his sharp wit, is said to have praised Kerr as one of the most intelligent actresses he'd worked with, a sentiment echoed by McCary, who admired her ability to project vulnerability without sentimentality. Terry McKay remains one of Tinseltown's most quietly powerful romantic presences, a woman defined not by grand declarations, but by grace under pressure and love that endures through silence, distance, and fate. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.